Hi, everyone. Jeff Jensen, Field Coordinator, Program Manager, Trees Forever. Thanks for joining us for this webinar today on the Iowa Hazelnut Project. So the goal of the Iowa Hazelnut Project is to accelerate hazelnuts in Iowa sustainably. And I really want to stress the sustainability portion of that goal. So if I was in the room right now, I'd ask for a raise of hands to see who was involved with or familiar with or heard the case of a new crop in the past, Jerusalem artichokes. And for those of you who are not familiar, just real quickly, so Jerusalem artichokes were promoted and kind of touted as the next greatest thing and crop for farmers looking to diversify into an additional crop. And you could get rich at the same time. Well, it was a total failure. And many farmers lost tons of money and time because there was no market for Jerusalem artichokes. Now, fast forward to the 21st century, and we've seen the explosion of Aronia berries. I remember going to my first Aronia berry growers conference in maybe 2015 or 16, maybe a year or two either direction. And it was I was absolutely blown away by the number of growers that had already had lots of plants in the ground. But then even more surprised at the number of acres being established. So talking to some folks, they'd say they were putting in 8, 10, maybe 15 acres of Aronia berries. And I asked almost every one of them where they were looking to market their berries. And just about all of them replied that they weren't sure yet, but they wanted to get plants in the ground. And they could always sell them directly to consumers at maybe farmers markets if needed. Another common response was that they're lined up with some outfit and they were going to buy everything that this producer could grow. Naturally, I wanted to probe a little bit to see if I could find out what sort of terms were being offered for these berry contracts. And I discovered that it was almost entirely on a handshake and a prayer. And if you're not familiar with Aronia berry today and the status of that industry, it is rough. So there's lots of growers who have been burned by various actors promising to buy berries and either not taking them or worse, taking them and then not paying for them. There's dozens, if not 100 Aronia berry growers or more that have just given up and either ripped out their bushes or simply rejected them and just allowing the animals to graze, caring little about the berries. I personally have 2 neighbors within about 3 miles of me, and I know of at least 3 other growers within about 30 minutes that have completely abandoned the idea of growing Aronia berries for profit. It's really sad. So 2 stories of a new crop in Iowa, one that was an absolute failure. And then with the Aronia berries, the jury's probably still out because there are some growers that have been successful, but overall it's not looking good. So I am particularly sensitive to the current situation, leading an effort to develop hazelnuts as a viable woody crop here in the Midwest. Now, it's not without its challenges, but I think with some careful and thoughtful planning, research, and promotion, I think we can eventually get there. And what I mean by that is a viable woody crop in the Midwest that is profitable. That's the goal. So how do we get there? Well, we do have several objectives that we're working on to achieve our goal and try to make some progress towards hazelnuts as a viable woody crop in the Midwest. So specifically, our goals with the Iowa Hazelnut Project, we're leading outreach and learning opportunities, and I say we as the Iowa Nut Growers Association. We're looking to establish field trials throughout Iowa and then develop some of these value-added opportunities. And so I'll go through each one of these just real briefly, and then we'll kind of get into it a little bit. So the Iowa Nut Growers Association is the lead organization working to lead the outreach and learning opportunities to potential and prospective growers. Now, we have partners like the University of Minnesota, University of Wisconsin, working with groups like the Arbor Day Foundation and the research being done at Rutgers and Oregon State University. And so through those connections, we can really provide some of the most up-to-date information and insight into growing hazelnuts profitably in the Midwest. A major component of our outreach and learning opportunities is the Hazelnut Academy, which will be starting in October here. And so we originally planned to do these learning groups in person throughout the state. Then COVID-19 happened, and so we basically had to transition to this Hazelnut Academy, which allows individuals to learn about hazelnuts, how to grow them, how to manage them, how to harvest, process, market, all from the comfort of their own home. So this Hazelnut Academy is also a great tool for us to screen and teach new growers before they ever put a plant in the ground. And then associated with the Hazelnut Academy is the development of different materials and guidance documents and fact sheets and just other general information to assist growers with getting started and then eventually establishing their own planting. So we certainly find it very important. This is one of the major components of the work that we're doing here, and that's the establishment of replicated joint performance trials. And then with that, smaller field trials. And this is, like I said, a major component of the Iowa Hazelnut Project. And then the overall federal grant that's funding us. So we're a smaller component. There's groups that are doing outreach and promotions in Wisconsin and Minnesota and Illinois as well. But for us here in Iowa, these joint performance trials consist of sites where the leading experimental genotypes are being grown. And then we can collect the data, and they consist of 12 plants of each of these genotype in randomized blocks grown under some fairly specific protocols. And so those are the big, what we call joint performance trials. Then we have smaller field trials that basically consist of 5 plants of a specific genotype, but we still do have them grown under the same protocols as the joint performance trials. So the spacing is the same between rows and within row. And then associated with these joint performance trials and smaller field trials is the facilitation of on-farm research to also gather some data and then confirm and validate really some of the assumptions that have been made regarding the production of hazelnuts in the Midwest. So for instance, it's pretty common to take under research settings some yield data and say this plant produced X amount of pounds in years 6, 7, 8, 9, and then extrapolate that to if we had this plant at 500 plants to the acre, what would that do? And I understand the desire to want to do that, but it is in no way, shape, or form real life. And so that's really part of what we want to do as well, is just validate some of these assumptions that are being made. And so these field trials are going to go throughout Iowa on the different landforms. And then we also want to investigate the soil type and plant productivity interactions that can occur as well. So the final objective we're working through is the development of value-added opportunities. So in-shell hazelnuts have limited marketability, and basically without processing to crack the shell and get to the delicious kernel, profitability is going to be difficult. Thus, one of the first value-added opportunities is to explore just basic processing to get to the kernel. So hazelnut kernels have a range of applications from confections to baked goods. You can crush it for oil. These and other additional opportunities like payments, for instance, for ecological services. Think carbon credits, water quality trading, wildlife habitat enhancements. They can be investigated as well as options to contribute to profitability, because we certainly do have this gap between when we plant a woody crop and the 3, 5, 7 years, whatever it is, until we actually get some production back. Because perennials vary, or differ, I should say, from annuals, in that they're not putting all of their energy into just seed for 1 year and then dying. They have to lay roots and develop the infrastructure then to provide a yield year after year after year. So here's some information on the Hazelnut Academy. These sessions will be virtual, but they'll run noon to 1 on these dates. These are the different topics. The Iowa Hazelnut Project is kind of an overview. Then we'll get into hazelnuts as a primer, just understanding the difference between the American hazelnuts, the European hazelnuts, and some things like that. We'll talk about planting. So very important before you ever put a plant into the ground. Then actual planting, maintenance, harvesting, which is going on right now. Actually, we're coming to the end of harvesting. We started back in August. And in fact, if you want to follow along, you can find the Iowa Hazelnut Project on Facebook, where we're posting some videos, or you can check out the Iowa Nut Growers Association YouTube page, where we've been posting some videos about the harvest going on this year. So they'll give you an opportunity to learn a few things about when they're ripe and how we go about doing the harvest at Hazel Acres in Nut Haven. So finally, on-farm field trials. We need growers. Growers wanted. So the opportunity here is to collaborate with the Iowa nut growers through the Iowa Hazelnut Project to establish your own on-farm field trial, growing these experimental genotypes with the advanced genetics. Excuse me. So a couple of things: growers need to be Iowa Nut Growers Association members. They need to complete the Hazelnut Academy so that they have a general understanding of hazelnuts and the concepts overall. They need to complete an application to become one of our on-farm collaborators, and then work with the nut growers to develop a planting plan, a maintenance plan, and a data management plan. And so what I mean by that is there's a real bottleneck right now in getting good plant material out onto the landscape to trial to see how well it does. So I mentioned that Iowa is one partner in this bigger effort in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois. And we want to be putting out different joint performance trials in all of those states. And then beyond that, we want to get to be able to do some research where we can have rows of clonal material so that we can do various fertilizer research projects, time of harvest projects, all sorts of different things that require clones within a row, essentially, to get good data, to make some determinations and suggestions. And so we need more growers, and specifically in Iowa, we're really looking to spread this out a little bit. And so we have some very different landforms in Iowa. And so I don't know if folks are familiar with the different landforms. You can see the map here. I would live in the Des Moines lobe. That's the furthest glaciation. And so that's the prairie pothole region, essentially. And of course, we have the Northwest Iowa plains in the Northwest Iowa, the Paleozoic Plateau, which is basically Northeast Iowa, and the karst region, the driftless area, we kind of call it. Then that Iowan surface. And incidentally, if anybody's interested, we had an absolutely fantastic webinar just a couple of weeks ago with Phil Kerr with the Iowa Geological Survey, and he gave it was stunning. I love this sort of stuff, so I'm a little bit biased. But how the Iowan surface came to be, and the pahas and the sand dunes and some of those things. And so it's worth going and checking out in our library of webinars, found on our webinars page, because it is just fascinating. So there's the Iowan surface there. Then, of course, there's the southern Iowa drift plain along the whole southern portion of Iowa, the Loess Hills, which is its own little landform, and then, of course, both the Mississippi and Missouri alluvial plains. And so we want to be putting either replicated field trials or some of these on-farm trials in all of those different landforms. So at the end of this project, we can have some meaningful data and be able to make some recommendations to growers in those areas about what plants might do well. So currently we have 3 sites. One is the Struker Research Site near Fenton, Iowa, which is only about a half-mile from where I live. Then there's the Del Lawrence Research Site in Marion, Iowa, just outside of Marion, and that's out there on the tip of the Iowan surface. And then we do have a project with the Indian Hills Community College down in Centerville. They're doing an on-farm trial, 5 different plants at their site there, where the Iowa Nut Growers Association already has a research site planted to pecans and hickories and black walnuts and chestnuts and English walnuts and all sorts of different things. And so we've added hazelnut component to that. And so we have that site there, but we are still looking for collaborators up in Northwest Iowa, in the Iowa Plains, in the Loess Hills, certainly far up in Northeast Iowa, on the karst region and the driftless area, and then some other areas to fill in, maybe in Southwest or in those alluvial plain areas, right down in the river valley of the Missouri or the Mississippi. I don't want to go into too much here, but the Northwest Iowa Plains is its own landform, gently rolling terrain with some integrated drainage networks, and it's this thick loess over glacial till. The Des Moines lobe is, again, this poorly drained area, a lot of prairie pothole regions, and so can be a challenge to grow hazelnuts because they do like well-drained areas. There's the Iowa surface, pardon me, this gently rolling terrain, bedrock near the surface. Again, a fantastic presentation in our webinar library, cannot suggest it enough. And then here's your karst region up there in the drift list of Northeast Iowa. There's going to be your alluvial plains, which is just this alluvium along the river bottoms. And then, of course, the Loess Hills, which is so unique in and of itself, how the loess came to be. And Phil talks a little bit about that loess in his presentation about the Iowan surface. And then, of course, is the Southern Iowa drift plain. This has got the bedrock exposed and lots of drainage networks. A lot of folks are familiar. Here's where this information comes from, the Landforms of Iowa, a great book by Gene Pryor. So a little bit about those research sites. This is the Struker research site, Lawrence research site, and then Indian Hills that I mentioned. So the Struker research site is just 35 miles from the Minnesota border. So our northernmost site in Iowa, right kind of smack dab in the middle, east to west, has two main soil types. There's Webster clay loam, which is deep and poorly drained, and then the Colon clay loam, which is very similar, deep and poorly drained. And so these are not necessarily the best types of soils to grow hazelnuts in, but it is what's pretty representative in the Des Moines lobe. And so we want to see how well they can do here, what sort of modifications, if any, we might need to do to encourage their growth and really make them thrive and take off. So that's why one of the reasons we're doing this in all of the landforms in Iowa is just to test out some of these experimental genotypes and see how they do. Here you can see some of the plants that were planted there. The root systems of the bare root dormant material is just, this isn't dormant, this is leafed out, but the bare root material looks like a little broom. And then those were some of the potted plants that came from the Nebraska program with huge root systems coming out the pots there. And you can see what we've done. We've tubed every plant or caged it if it's not conducive to tubing. We've put down a piece of landscape fabric and then, of course, mulch over the top of that as well. And so that's what we mentioned by protocol. We won't necessarily dictate you use landscape fabric or not, or wood chips or not, but you do have to have a plan to mulch them, especially in the cold winters. They can take their toll in a watering plan. For this particular site, we don't have access to groundwater or a hydrant, and so the watering plan is the yellow buckets. Drill a hole in the side of the bucket towards the bottom, and then we're able to fill those 7-gallon buckets and let the water kind of just drain out slowly. Okay, how about the Lawrence research site? So this is Del Lawrence, and he's located just outside of Marion, which is 40 minutes north of Iowa City. The main soil type there is this Judson silty clay loam. This is very deep, well-drained soils, and there's a difference, certainly. Some of the plants at Del's have just taken off. Was it last week or the week before? We were there, did an inventory and took measurements on plant height and width to get an overall feel for volume of plants. And he's really got some nice looking plants that are 6 foot tall or better and just doing real well. And he even had some male catkins and a few female flowers last year. Lots of male catkins this year. So we're looking to get some nuts, our very first nut harvest there in 2022. So you can see again some of these bare root dormant plants and how large, in this case, not bare root dormant, just bare root plants because they're leafed out, but how large those root systems are. And so there we're digging a wide, shallow hole with the shovel, nestling those roots in, and then covering back up then with dirt, landscape fabric, and some mulch. And there's Del, the man himself, a longtime nut grower, has another farm by Sabula where he has hickories and black walnuts. And Del has participated in several of the northern nut growers, the big one, annual meetings where he's demonstrated his black walnut cracker, which is always a treat for folks. So those are the hazelnut joint performance trials. I mentioned Indian Hills. I unfortunately don't have any pictures right now of that site. We just got it established here last spring, but there will be, or last fall I should say, but there will be an opportunity for folks to see that in person if they'd like, because we are having a field day, a Southern Iowa agroforestry tour on Saturday, October 2nd. We're going to be visiting 3 different sites. One of those sites is going to be that Iowa Nut Growers Association research planting at Indian Hills Community College, where we'll be having lunch. And so if folks want to see that planting, not only the hazelnuts, but the pecans, chestnuts, black walnuts, and other things, that'll be a great opportunity to see it and to learn from other growers. That day, we will also visit a chestnut farm, a 40-acre chestnut farm, and then a member who passed on, but who left a legacy with a lot of grafted material, Norm Hansen by Unionville. And so we'll be talking about invasive species, forest management, and then trying to find some of the grafted stuff that he did from back in the day. Specific to Dell here, Dell's having a hazelnut field day at the research site there on the 29th. That's Wednesday, September 29th, 5 o'clock. And so he'll be giving an overview. I'll be there to talk about the hazelnut project. I'll have samples of nuts to give out. We'll be talking about some of the different varieties and how they grow, how they did, how they survived. And then in addition to Dell's, at the Fenton by my place here, we'll be having a field day in just a week. That's September 22nd at 5 o'clock, where we'll be touring the Fenton research site, the Struker research site, pardon me. We'll take a look at some of my processing equipment. We'll go take a look at the hazelnut planting at Hazel Acres and the drying bin that we use. You can get a feel for size and scale, and then enjoy the evening with some refreshments and, of course, some hazelnut treats. So some outreach opportunities coming up in September and October here. We hope you can join us, certainly. And there's the Hazelnut Academy, which will be kicking off in October, which is National Nut Month. So a great opportunity to kick off the Hazelnut Academy because we're talking nuts the whole month of October, certainly. So that kind of wraps things up. If folks have any questions, please feel free to type them in the question box now. We can kind of hang out. I know this forum isn't exactly conducive to back and forth asking questions and answering, but if you do take the time to type one in, I'll certainly try to answer it. That was just kind of a quick overview of the Iowa Hazelnut Project. If you're looking to get involved, please contact me or visit the Iowa Nut Growers Association website. My contact information is both there as well as on the Trees Forever website. That's my 9-to-5 job. I'd like to thank folks for joining in today. If you have any suggestions for webinars in the future, please let me know. We're always eager to have new ideas, topics, and presenters. With that, I think we'll sign off. Hope everyone has a great day. Fall is finally here. Take care, everyone.